Alright guys, Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, is, to me, just like The Phantom Menace and just like Revenge of the Sith, they're ones that I grew up with. And I grew up with the first 6 Star Wars movies anyways. I grew up with all 6. But watching these 3 in the theater was an experience for me. I know I watched 2 and 3 in the theater. I believe I saw Phantom Menace in the theater too, but I can't remember because I was so young. But watching episode 2 again, for me, this one, if I had to rank it, it's the weakest one. But despite that, I think that this movie still has so many great things about it because I still love this movie. Like, I love all the Star Wars films. Now, the story of this one is that Anakin Skywalker has grown up a little more, and it's been 10 years since The Phantom Menace, and he and Padme start to form a romantic bond, while Obi-Wan goes and tries to figure out this mystery of these clones and why they're being created. And those stories in their own right, I think, are fascinating. And I think that, again, in terms of, like, editing, this one's, out of George Lucas's 3 movies, in terms of editing, this one is a really greatly edited one, too, because of the fact you have to juggle these 2 stories really in a very smart way, and he does such a great job of juggling both stories of Anakin and Padme and Obi-Wan. And every time he places in scenes of each other, they both balance each other well, just like he does with in Phantom Menace, specifically the ending fight scene where he balances every single group of characters. He does that in the whole movie this way, in this one, where it's like he balances so well between the 2 groups of Anakin and Padme and then Obi-Wan. And I really, really love it how that works with this movie. Now, in this one it's interesting because Anakin is recast because, of course, it's only like 3 years later and Anakin's supposed to be way older. So he is replaced by Hayden Christensen, who I really, really love in this movie. I think he's so great. This one and Revenge of the Sith, I love him in both. And watching him in this movie is so well done because he and Padme form this bond where it's kind of a shy, awkward relationship at first. Like, they don't fully know what to do, and they don't fully know if they should do this. And I really like the fact that they even go into that, where Padme says, like, we'll be living a lie, like, we can't do this, and we can't give up both of our dreams and ambitions just for love. And I think that even though it's simple with the romance, I really like those moments. And it takes those 2 actors to make it work for me. And I really love those scenes between both of them. And I think that it's kind of awkward in a way on purpose, where, like, these 2 want something, but they also don't want it, and also they're just really confused in the situation. Like, what do we do? Really, what do we do in this situation? So I think I really do like the romance in this movie. And it's kind of hokey, but, you know, it's like other Star Wars. Every Star Wars movie has hokey things about it. So for me, really like those scenes. Really like Anakin's gradual progression in this movie, even though it's really simple, but it is incredibly effective. That moment where Anakin comes back, he and Padme go back to Tatooine, he finds out that his mom is missing, and he goes and looks for her, and then he finds her hooked up and dying, and then she dies in his arms saying, "I love you," but doesn't even finish the sentence. And that moment and that musical cue of Anakin whenever his mom dies in his arms, where it sounds like you could feel in his mind the way that his mind is working, like he is so furious. The way that John Williams did that is so incredible. And again, John Williams' score in this, like every other Star Wars movie, is incredible. But that moment where Anakin breaks and, like, his mom dies in his arms and the music swells, where, like, it's a weird, like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's incredible the way that the music score works in this movie with Anakin in that moment. It's just so moving, and it just is so incredible, and it really shows how whenever his rage happens in this movie, it feels so warranted. And also, speaking of the music, I want to mention the song Across the Stars, or the score Across the Stars, is one of the best Star Wars scores I've ever heard in any of the films. It is one of the most sweeping, romantic, like, pieces of music that's just one of the absolute best. And John Williams, again, is brings his absolute A game to this movie. Like every single movie, his scores are incredible, but this one, that Across the Stars score is so moving and so incredibly effective. Um, and I really like with Obi-Wan too how he also is in this situation where like he isn't fully unaware of like how like he knows the Jedi are corrupt and Obi-Wan will eventually go into hiding and eventually be one of the last ones to survive. But I like how in this one, he's kind of away from the Jedi in this one until the end, where like he's really trying to figure out this mystery, and it's really fascinating. It feels kind of like a noir kind of movie in some ways. Whenever there are scenes of him looking for like information, and I think that it's well done. And again, Ewan McGregor is great, and I really like him in this one as well. And his story is just interesting. And again, both of these stories balanced together I think are very interesting. And again, like The Phantom Menace, the last act, I'd say The Phantom Menace last act I like more if I compare the two, but this one is still great. The last act where Anakin and Padme are in this giant factory, like where these droids are being created, and it's really, really tense and really cool and really just well done. And then whenever you get to the final moments before the final climax in the Geonosian like arena, that scene where like they're talking to each other and like he says like he's been dying to be with her, and she said that she's died every minute that she's been with him too, like waiting to be together. And that moment where they kiss and like the music swells is just one of those film moments that's just so well done and just so it gives me chills. And getting into the Geonosian arena, it is so great because all the Jedi this time come out and fight. And I thought in the last movie, they didn't have that. They only had a couple because it was a little threat, I guess. And also the Jedi are arrogant. But in this one, I guess it was too much and they had to go and fight this time, all of them. So it's awesome seeing Samuel L. Jackson and Mace Windu finally fight with his purple lightsaber, which is awesome. And just seeing all the Jedi fight are great. And I really love how, in the end, Anakin's having this conflict where, like, they're getting away, and then Padme falls out of the Clone Republic ship, and Anakin's, like, freaking out, saying, I can't leave her, and then Obi-Wan says, well, what would Padme do in your position? And then Anakin calms down and says, she would do her duty. And it's so well done. And I love that. I love whenever he does, like, with this whole movie, it's just so well done with all these characters. And I really love everything about him, about Anakin, about Padme, about Obi-Wan. All three of them are just so interesting for characters. I love them all. And just, I love the ending between that, and I love how the villain in this movie is Count Dooku, played by Christopher Lee, who is already great in all of his stuff, but he was in a big blockbuster home run in the 2000s, early 2000s, because he had Star Wars in episodes 2 and 3, and then he was in Lord of the Rings 1 and 2. Unless you count Return of the King, but that's only an extended when you see him. But he was in Star Wars and Lord of the Rings at the same time. How badass is that? How awesome is that? And he's great in both franchises. And he is just an intimidating villain, and I like how he barely does anything in the movie, but he's great. I love that scene where he traps Obi-Wan and says, "What if I were to tell you that the whole the whole Republic is overrun by Darth Sidious, this character who is going to take over?" And then Obi-Wan says, "I don't believe you. I don't believe this to be happening." And it's such a great moment between those two actors, and I love how it shows that Obi-Wan in the moment is still, he hasn't like changed his views in the Jedi, but like he is looking at it like, this is a lie, this is deceiving. And even Count Dooku says Qui-Gon Jinn would have joined me, and you like if he were alive. And it's such a great character moment between the two of them, and how Count Dooku is with his games is trying to warp Obi-Wan's sense of view, and I think that's great. And I love the fact that he's telling the truth too, but Obi-Wan just doesn't believe it. I think that's awesome. The truth is in plain sight right there. And then I love the fight between Count Dooku and Yoda. That is so cool, because Yoda, while in the original trilogy, he is 900 years old, he's old, he's dying. In this one, I love the fact that they play with your expectations, where he walks in the cane, and then you realize that he actually can fight, and since he's so small, he can use that aerialness to his advantage and fight like he does, and it's so cool and so awesome in just such an entertaining way. And it's just so cool to see Yoda fight and be an awesome character. Even though he's great in the original trilogy, I love seeing him in his prime, just like they did with the Jedi, or the other Jedi. So I really love that final fight between them, and I love how Anakin gets his arm chopped off like Luke, but in a different way, where like it doesn't really do the same. Like it's a poetic thing where like Anakin loses his arm, Luke loses his arm. It's poetic in the first 6 movies how every single one of them, like Phantom Menace and New Hope, parallel each other, and then Empire and Attack of the Clones do, and Return of the Jedi and Revenge of the Sith do, and it's this one also ends on a note like Empire, where like it's the second chapter in the trilogy where you've got the clone army is starting, and then you see that Palpatine, you know that he's behind it. Palpatine is starting and initiating this full set of the Clone Wars. Like, Clone Wars are starting while you have Anakin and Padme get married. And that last moment of them just sitting there in a private marriage, looking at each other with a look of unexpectancy, like they don't know what's going to happen. It's just so moving. And again, with the score, it just makes it so much greater in the final moments of the movie, where they're just sitting there right after they get married, and they just look at each other in a way where they don't know what's going to happen. Like, they know something bad is probably going to happen on the horizon because they took this choice that they probably shouldn't have done, because they both could lose everything for love. But I thought that it just worked so well, and just those final moments in the movie and how the score swells and how it ends is just incredible. So just everything about Attack of the Clones, really, really love. Again, like every Star Wars movie, I keep saying I love them all, but this one, to me, just, man, every moment, every action sequence, all the characters, the musical score, like everything about it, the editing, the visuals. Even though the visuals you can argue are a bit dated, it doesn't matter to me. It still is so well done. Like, I love everything about Attack of the Clones. Really, really love it so much. So that is my review on Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Stay tuned for next Thursday, where I will review Revenge of the Sith, which is my favorite Star Wars movie. So thank you guys so much for watching.